I'm talking with Mary Inglis. Is it Inglis or Ingles?
Inglis.
I've always thought you were the sensible one.
A sensible one?
Yeah.
As opposed to what and who?
I don't know. There's been times, there's been a community meeting and you're like the one person who stands up and says something sensible. But I feel like you have this ability to somehow just pick the right thing to say in that moment.
Uh-huh.
How do you do that?
Oh my goodness. Alex, I don't know. I get a prompting to speak. I usually it's kind of like my heart starts beating and it's kind of like I know I've got to say something. So that's one thing. I don't always know what I'm going to say, or I may have a beginning sense of it. I guess something in me is trying to listen to like the whole field. I try to listen to like everything and find a way that I feel would support a movement of the whole thing forward.
Yeah, because it is often those times when it seems like things get more and more polarised.
Uh-huh.
And maybe it's that approach you take, which is looking at what's the whole situation. Yeah. What does the whole situation mean? Not how do we try and win one of the sides? Right. Maybe that's what you're saying.
Yes. Yeah. Or how can we? Yeah, because I think when there's the conflict, that it's things just get a bit like stuck, rather than fluid. And I think that there's always something in each of the voices that's important. Yeah, I don't know. I also I quite often will make a connection or tune to the angel of Findhorn, and I feel the angel, supports the well-being of the whole thing. So maybe that's helping a bit.
You work with like subtle activism.
Yeah.
This idea of working yourself, then affecting the rest of the world.
Yes.
Can you talk about that and your understanding of what that is?
I think for me, subtle activism is a way of using our own energy field in a way that can benefit both our local environment and further afield. Because I think on the subtle energetic dimensions, we're not limited to being just here and now. If I'm thinking of my sister in South Africa, for instance, if I'm the qualities I'm holding in myself as I think of her, or of anyone, become available to her on the kind of energetic or subtle dimensions, almost as if I was sitting next to her. So part of the subtle activism is generating in ourselves the qualities that we wish to make available to a person or a situation. And that's the first step of actually embodying them, not just thinking about them and sending them. It's actually, because if I think about love, for instance, I can think of sending love, but if I connect with an experience of love or how that affects me, or contentment or courage, there are subtle shifts in my physical being as well as energetic, and that links to different dimensions in ourselves. And that embodied presence can have an effect. I think I maybe shared with you at one point the example of the story about the Rainmaker, which is a friend of Jung's. I've forgotten his name. Was in China and in a village that was experiencing a lot of drought, and all the animals were dying and plants were dying. And so they called for a rainmaker who came, and as soon as he came, he asked to be put into a little hut on the edge of the village and just have food brought to him and not to be disturbed. And so that happened for 3 days, and the third day it rained. And when he came out, Jung's friend, whose name I wish I could remember, asked him, "What did you do?" And the villager said, "What did you do?" And he said, "I didn't do anything. It's just, but I come from an area that is in the Tao, that things are in harmony. And I came here, and the place was out of harmony. So I became out of harmony. So I needed to get back into harmony." So he went and did that work. And he said, and then, of course, once I was back in harmony, then of course it rained. And I think that's part of the principle of subtle activism as well, this coming into harmony in ourselves. And I think these days I'm more and more aware of that. I think if we can create pockets of calm and coherence and harmony in ourselves, that is a contribution to the whole planetary energetic system. Because we do pick up stuff, like the rainmaker became out of harmony because he was in an area that was out of harmony. And I think that's happening a lot. There's so much going on in the world that people's nervous systems and their energetic systems and their physical systems are jangly. And so whatever we can do, I think, to come back into coherence, physically, subtly, spiritually, is a contribution to the world. And the other thing about subtle activism, or this particular approach, is also engaging with and inviting in and connecting with the subtle presences or the subtle and spiritual presences that are also working in different situations. Because that also, I think, gives them a conduit into different, the more physical and energetic dimensions, so that and expands us also out into wider dimensions, so that together we create a field that I think is bigger than any of us can do on our own. And I think I shared with you once before this friend of David Spangler's is experienced in subtle activism work, and he told how one time he was traveling on a plane and there was a baby crying and becoming increasingly distressed, and he could feel the atmosphere in the cabin of the plane getting increasingly fractious. So he decided he would send calming energies to the baby. So he calmed himself and held the baby in the energetic space of calmness, and nothing happened. But then he became aware of like a presence, a non-physical presence in the cabin that kind of said, well, I can help. And so they kind of joined forces, which is created like a collaborative field or an alliance space, which is also something that's worked with in subtle activism, this kind of alliance space, like a shared space. And they held the baby within that, and the baby calmed down and stopped crying. And then the man thought, oh, great, this is done. And they disconnected from baby and presence in the cabin and went back to reading his book, and the baby started crying again. And what he realized was that it needed both of them. So he reconnected with the presence, and once again they held the baby for longer in this energetic field. The baby calmed down again, this time slept and stayed asleep. And what he realized was that without his presence there, this presence in the cabin didn't have as much access to the baby. But also that he couldn't do it on his own. But the two of them together could create a field that was larger than either of them could do themselves, that had an effect in the physical world. So I think there's something of that behind the subtle activism too, and working with non-physical presences.
It seems the world's getting more crazy rather than less crazy recently. Is there anything we can do? What's the best thing? If someone's sitting at home thinking there's all this stuff going on in the world, what can I do? I'm just one person, and there's massive events going on all over the place in different countries.
Yeah. Well, I certainly think that this whole thing of subtle activism that I've been talking about is important. I also think that in some way some of what's happening in the world at large is getting echoed here in the community. Certainly it feels like there's been increasing polarization and conflict and things. So I think dealing with that ourselves here, I think also contributes. Because I think if we can resolve something, then again that creates a larger energetic pool that that can have an effect.
So we're like the rainmakers.
Sort of like the rainmaker, yes. Yes. Yeah, and I don't think we can expect to be unaffected by it, because I think the currents of our times run through all of us. And, you know, what's happening out there is on a larger scale than here, but there are definitely echoes and resonances. So if we can make changes here, then that will also resonate in the opposite direction. And then I also think if people, I don't think just inner activism or subtle activism is enough. I think, you know, people drawn to do other activism is important as well. But I think also how we do that is important. I know it's a big ask, but to be able to do that, do kind of social activism from a point of steadiness and cohesion and even respect for others. In South Africa, I was very involved with social movements there, and at one point our family were involved with. We for a period of a few months, we were kind of in connection with some non-physical presence that kind of we're getting some kind of teachings from, and then we also asked, you know, all sorts of questions like where are we from and where do we were before. And
was this directly, or was this someone that you had found who was connected with?
No, it was actually, you know, like Ouija boards where things spell out. One evening we just played around, you know, we just let's try this, and this glass kept on moving around between letters, and we said, "You're moving it." "No, I'm not." "You're moving it." "No, I'm not." It was like, no, you know, nobody was actually moving it, but it was. I mean, it was, and that was it. And one of the things we asked about was the protests and things that we were involved with, and what came was that yes, it is important to take a stand in these in these kinds of situations. It's, you know, what you're doing is okay, it's really important that you do that with love for those against whom you are protesting, and. I mean, I think that was really quite pivotal for me. I don't know that I could ever say that I actually really came to love them, but at least I had a different attitude towards them. It was like, okay, that's who they are, and this is who I am, and this is the stand I'm making. I think if there could be more of that sort of thing in protests, because a lot of the protests around at the moment are, you know, they turn violent.
It's a sort of like, I hate you and I hate you, and, you know, just basically a punch fight or an emotional punch fight. But there's no actual love sometimes in this. It's just people hating each other. Yeah. Or
wanting to almost like eliminate each other. They become the enemy. There's quite a lot of, I've been seeing some posts on social media around a lot of the protests that are happening in the States. And, you know, a number of people calling for just a steadiness. Don't get into violence. Just hold your position. Be here. Be steady. You know, take the stand. But you don't have to get violent. You don't have to hate the others. Maybe you can't love them, but you know, just take your position.
Was that was that the approach you took in South Africa?
Yes. Yeah.
What do you think has been the impact of Findhorn in the world, and what do you think? How do you think that's going to keep going into the future?
Going into the future, I don't know, because I think so much is changing in the world and here, and it feels as if there's a recalibration going on. Here but also in the world, and that something new is coming, and I'm not sure what it is. The Lorien Association have recently, they're taking, I can't remember what they call it, I think Still Point, I think they're calling it. They are not doing any programs for 7 months because they have a sense that something new is coming forward, and that just to repeat what's there already isn't the appropriate thing. So just they're doing some listening time, and just, so what is it that needs to come forward next? And in some ways I feel we're doing that, and we're doing that also, not as consciously.
It's more like we've been forced to, rather than...
It's been more forced here, yes.
Like accidentally.
Yes. Yeah, and it's maybe so in the world as well. It's
It was interesting that, we had this pandemic, and there was a big pause, and then suddenly the world went crazy.
Yes.
I mean, okay, it's always been crazy, but it's strange that we kind of reached this plateau still point, and then suddenly things ramped up very quickly in the years after.
Yes. Yeah.
Do you know what?
Yeah.
That.
And all and all the different alliances in the world are shifting and changing, and I don't know. The influence of Findhorn, I don't know. Yesterday evening there was a meeting in Cologne about this, the history things that Liza is organising. I've forgotten the name of them, but Jonathan Caddy and Craig and John Williner were the kind of key speakers, but other people were chiming in as well. And part of it was part of it. That question was asked yesterday, and I think a lot of the things that Findhorn was working with way back at the beginning are kind of like it's common knowledge now. The whole ecology movement, connection with the land, life is everything is alive. There's so many things that are just part of the collective awareness now, and I think Findhorn helped seed that and grow that, or grow that awareness. So I don't know that I think we need to maintain that, and maybe even like revitalize it, because I think it's not as prominent as it was. But then maybe it was prominent then because it was new and everybody was going, oh my God, this is so exciting.
It's a bit like me, I buy a new bicycle or something and I ride it all the time, and then I get bored of it. It's exciting, I do meditation, and then I get out of the habit, and then I watch the news, and then and maybe that's what's happened to the world. We've got, oh yeah, I get that now, it's not new anymore, and then we forget about doing it. So it almost needs to be maybe a little bit of a revitalization of it,
right?
Somehow, but without it making it look like, oh, we're just going to do that old stuff we did before.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. I think it could be like a springboard or the ground for to move from. But I think there is something new coming. But I'm not sure what. But like Jen, there are eco-villages all over the place now. That's it's not that Findhorn started it, but it was like a really key thing. Somebody once used this analogy of like whatever it is that's coming in to the world. It's a bit like if you imagine a hand coming down through a bubble, through a bubble that is not going to burst when the fingers come through. So it initially you just see each finger comes through, and so it looks like all of these different places are, oh, this is happening there and there. But then as you go further down, suddenly you see there's a hand, and the whole thing is then manifest. I notice I'm making lots of gestures, which of course I'm not going to show on the podcast. And I think that there may be something of that. There was no recycling done hardly in the world back in when Findhorn began, and just this more appreciation of taking care of the planet and taking care of our environments and things, that's that's like a hand that's come in from things, and and then maybe there's another hand coming in, and we don't know what that is yet. What do you think?
So in some ways, we're a lot better at looking after the environment, looking after ourselves, but maybe there's just some extra step that we haven't got about relationship with each other. I mean, people are quite happy to make sure that they look after the environment, and then they want to look after themselves, they meditate, but there's something about the way in which we relate together as human beings, which at least currently it feels like we haven't quite got that yet. And maybe that's what's happening right now in the world. With all these countries going after each other. There's something about that. Even though we've kind of got a more eco mindset, we haven't quite got the relationship aspect. I don't know if that's just we're forever doomed to continue to fight all the time, or whether there's something that we'll eventually learn. But we obviously haven't got that yet.
I'm always impressed when if there's a kind of conflict where somebody can see the other person's point of view, or steps back and says, I was wrong, or that was a mistake, and those things just do so much in building bridges, and that seems to be a difficult thing. No, I'll get more stuck and more entrenched in my point of view, and want you to agree with me. I think also for me, it's like more of a partnership with the non-physical presences that are around as well. I think that's important. I think in Barbara's podcast, and she was talking about the importance of attunement, and I think that's important. One of the things we were talking about in the meeting yesterday was how decisions were made in the early days, and in some ways you could say Peter made them, a lot of them, but actually a lot of them were made by just listening to. So the group of focalizers would get together, and then there was a core group that everybody reflected on, and in the groups different points of view, and then we also tuned. So we kind of like listened inside, and then came out and shared, and then maybe went inside again, because it wasn't like an attunement and now we all know what to do. It was attunement, and then these different perspectives came forward, and both were absolutely necessary. But having that time of like an inner stillness and silence and reflection on what we were looking at, and then sharing, and then attuning again, we'd get to decisions in a way that was supported by the whole. I was in the core group at the time that Clooney was bought, and there was some like sticking points around the negotiations in terms of buying it. The Allied hotels who were selling, there was some work that was needed, some firework to bring the building up to meet fire regulations, and they said, no, you guys have to do it, and we said, no, you do it, you're the seller. And they also wanted us to take on the coach tours that were booked for the following season, and we were saying, no, we want to use Clooney for our own programs. And they said no, and then they gave us an ultimatum. They said, you need to decide within the next week or so, because we have another buyer who's interested, and if you're not going to do this under these conditions, we're going to go to the other buyer. Now, whether it was a bluff or not, we don't know. But Peter and Eileen were away. They were touring in the States. There was no way to get hold of them, no phones, internet, anything like that. So core group had to make the decision, and we got together at 2:00 in the afternoon, meditated upon it, and came out of the first meditation, and half the people said yes and half the people said no. But then we explored what's behind the no's and the yeses, And some people were saying yes, because we just need to trust that God will take away the coach tours. Particularly, that was a big sticking point. And the other people, some people were saying no, because we don't want the coach tours. The coach tours was a big thing. And there were other considerations as well. But it was just interesting that people came with a yes or no, depending on what the pictures they had around things and their considerations that they had about this and that and the other. So we spent probably about 4 hours on this process of like tuning in, sharing all of these things, going inside again, sharing again. And of course there were differences, but also people were really listening to each other. There was a couple of times it got a bit conflictual, but it was held well enough. And by the end of the afternoon we got to a yes, but we needed to totally be willing to take the coach tours, if that was what, maybe God would take them away, but if they didn't get taken away, then we would do them. So it was a much more informed yes. It was all the way through the thinking, the feeling, looking at what would be physically required, rather than just like a yes or no from on high. And
I think some people's ideal vision of attunement is everyone closes their eyes and everyone gets a yes, and it's all the same vision.
No, yeah, I've not experienced that. I mean, very occasionally, but usually not. And that used to be used a lot. That's not used as much now, and I think that would be helpful to bring some of that back. And Craig was remembering that even some of the really big decisions, like this decision, and Liza as well, big decisions around, like for instance, buying the caravan park. Francois Duquesne, who was the vocalizer at the time, said we need to have everybody agreeing to our going ahead with this, because it was a huge thing. And financially in the moment, but also it had huge ramifications for the future as well. It was a step change in who we were as a community. So, some people wanted to maintain, the more cozy feel, and others were, yes, it's time to expand into something more. But there was remembering how there were some really fiery meetings in the hall. Of course, it was much smaller. It was mostly just foundation, maybe a few what we called extended members, in which they would attune, and then people would share things, and it could get quite fiery, and then attune again, and again it got to a yes. And I think that's a good way. It's more difficult. It's more difficult now. The foundation was a fairly cohesive body, and who we are now isn't as cohesive. But I think maybe if like a few groups just began using that more, it'd be a little bit like subtle activism. It'll spread.
I think people's patience is less these days a little as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
You can send a message instantly to someone on the other side of the world.
I know.
You can
yes.
stick your food in the microwave and have it heated up in 30 seconds.
Right. Yes. Yes. Yeah.
But we do need to slow down.
Yeah.
As well. I think I'll stop there. I'll send you the recording afterwards so you can have a listen and see it.
Okay.
I haven't taken anything weirdly out of context.
All right. Okay. Okay. Thank you. That's a lot of work to go through that.
Yeah, maybe an hour or so. Yeah.
Uh-huh. Only an hour. Wow.
Maybe 2.
Okay. Good. Thank you.